Nonprofit governance.
Nonprofit answers.
Nonprofit board.
Nonprofit management.
Nonprofit marketing.
Nonprofit resources.
The Alliance for Nevada Nonprofits presents Nonprofit Everything, the podcast about everything nonprofit, with your host, Andy Shurik and Stacy Wedding.
Well, welcome to another episode of Nonprofit Everything, the podcast where we answer questions about everything nonprofit. I'm Andy Shurik.
I'm Stacy Wedding.
And we're going to get started in just a second. So one of the things that we've talked about a couple of times is that the podcast is produced by the Alliance for Nevada Nonprofits. So Alliance for Nevada Nonprofits is the state association of nonprofits for Nevada. They are a fantastic resource. If you have any questions about starting up a nonprofit and you don't necessarily think it's something that you want answered on a podcast, absolutely reach out to Ann, give him a call, send him an email. You might tell him that you don't want the question answered on the podcast because we might just steal it anyway. But there's a fantastic resource, and it's made up of all of the nonprofits in the state of Nevada. So we can connect you with people that are doing similar work to what you're doing. If you have something that's very specific, we're just sort of a group that's out here to help to make charity work in Nevada much, much easier. So we're looking forward to helping you out with that. But then another thing that we wanted to talk about. So we're on episode, 8 or 9 or something like that.
We've lost track, probably.
It seems like a million.
Yeah.
We've had lots of conversations with people in the community about, hey, have you listened to it? What's your feedback? And some of the feedback we're getting, most of the feedback we're getting is actually very good. So people seem to like the podcast. They like the format. They like the things that we're talking about. But then every once in a while, we'll talk to somebody who will say, there was something that you talked about that I have another opinion on. And I think that's fantastic.
Oh, yeah. Here's the deal, right? Andy has his background. I have my background. And there's probably many things and many topics in the sector of nonprofits that you could have 5 different opinions, 5 different perspectives on, and they're all valuable. So I would love to hear those differences of opinion or people saying, you guys are crazy.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you have something that you think expands on something we said, or we said something and you think it's not right, absolutely reach back out to us, because we will either bring you on the show and you can tell us through these microphones right here, like what the actual answer is. We would love to do that, or we will make corrections, or not that anything we've said is wrong.
Oh, of course not. Although I do have to share a little funny story. So, Andy and I had this whole little back and forth. So, the nerds that we are, and I hope you don't mind me calling you a nerd, Andy, but the nerds that we are, Andy had said, we're going to, do another bi-weekly. I saw somewhere bi-weekly, and I said, no, really, Andy, it's bi-monthly. I mean, this is a bi-monthly podcast. It happens twice a month. Well, guess what, folks? We are such nerds about this stuff. We both looked it up. We weren't even together. We both looked it up. 2 different dictionaries. Yes, 2 different dictionaries, and found out that we were both correct, that I guess you can use either one to talk about the fact that this is produced twice a month. But point being that we are not the end-all, be-all. We certainly know that we don't know everything. That is one thing we are definitely sure on, so we would love your feedback.
Absolutely. And we love bringing in experts, too. So if you're an expert on a particular topic and you want, say you're the world's best at keeping volunteers engaged, let us know, because we want to talk to you about that, because we get questions about that kind of thing all the time, and we want to make sure that we get the best and most accurate answers out to you. And if you do have questions, again, this whole thing runs on questions. So if you have questions, even if you think they're stupid, you'll hear some stupid questions. Don't be afraid to ask. Notice we don't read any names, so we're never going to call you out.
You're totally protected.
You're totally anonymous, unless you want us to. We could do that too. But anything you want to know, if we don't know the answer, we will reach out to people and we'll have them answer it on our behalf.
This podcast works because of you, so we need your participation. We need to hear from you, whether it's you guys should, add this to the format, whether it's here's a question, or whether it's, I totally disagree with what you said in the last episode, and we will make sure we cover it.
Awesome. And with that, we will jump right in.
All right, Andy, a local business wants to give us a percentage of each sale from a product, but one of our board members said something about commercial co-ventures. What is that?
Oh, gosh. So thankfully here in Nevada, there's no law
about commercial co-ventures. So in some states, there's what's called a commercial co-venture law. And what that means is if you have a product and you say something like 10% of the proceeds from this product are going to be given to charity, the state wants to make sure that you are not lying. So the state puts in a commercial co-venture law, which says that you have to comply with a whole bunch of different requirements that allow you to say that, or else you can get into trouble. Generally, it's similar to, in Nevada, we've got the charitable solicitation registration statement that you have to fill. It's an extra box that you fill out when you do your articles and put your
Like your annual filings.
yeah, your annual filings. Thank you. The annual filings. And you check the box, and basically you just agree that you've read it. It's like pretty much all that it is here in Nevada. But in other states, there are laws specifically about that, and you can get in trouble if you are not complying with the commercial co-venture laws.
And that is incumbent on the nonprofit, not the company.
It's a little
Or
bit of
both?
Yeah,
Okay.
it's a little because you're going into an agreement with it. So nonprofits need to know that it exists, and the companies need to be able to comply with it. So in Nevada, I guess it could happen in Nevada if your organization is more than just in this state. If you're working in multiple states and you have an agreement with another for-profit entity, actually it works the same with a nonprofit entity. So if you agree to sell a product with another nonprofit, you might, in some states, trigger the commercial co-venture, and you have to actually file and say that this is what we're doing and this is why. Yeah, thankfully in Nevada, there's not a ton of that happening. And well, the laws go into place because someone screwed up,
Yes.
right? Somebody figured out a way to cheat, and then they put a law to prevent you from cheating. So apparently nobody's cheated badly enough in Nevada for them to have
Let's
to
hope
get
it
around
remains
it.
that way.
Yeah. So in the state that you're in, so the state association, so here in Nevada, you could call Ann and say, Ann, hey, are there commercial co-venture laws? And we will be able to give you the information about that. If you're working in another state, if you're in Ohio, I know Illinois has it, I know New York has it, Florida has it. If you're in one of those states, you can call their state association and say, can you tell me about the commercial co-venture laws? And they'll be able to give you very specific requirements for the state that you're in.
And I think in addition, this is really probably related to the question, not exactly tied to the question, but when we see things like this happen, it goes back to, again, I'm a huge believer. I probably should have been an attorney in another life, but putting things in writing so you're really clear with the company that is doing, giving you a portion of the proceeds of the sales. What are their expectations of you? What are their consumers being told? Do you get to approve communications going out about it and listen to those first? How are they reflecting your nonprofit as they communicate? Because some of this is brand protection as well. And are you aligning yourself with the company you want to be aligned with? Kind of what are your responsibilities in promotion of the sale? And are they expecting you to drive so much traffic there? So I think some of that being really just talking about expectations is so important in these kinds of things.
Yeah, absolutely. And when you mentioned the brand, that's a big consideration. I mean, it doesn't have to do with commercial co-venture laws specifically, but does your brand, do you feel comfortable partnering with a particular for-profit? Are they using your brand to sort of sanitize the things that they're doing, and do you want to necessarily be involved in that? So yeah, those are the conversations. Not all money is good money.
Right,
Some money
that's
is
so
not
true.
good money, right?
Run for the hills.
Right.
Andy, here's one for you. What kind of financial information should nonprofits have on their website for the public to view?
Okay, so should, I guess, is the operative word, right? So the IRS doesn't require that anything be on the website. They require that you make it publicly available, like the 990, your most recent 990, and the 1023, and your 990, actually parts of the 990, not the whole thing, like the 990T, if you have to pay some tax, that has to go on there. Schedule B, which is the listing of donors, doesn't have to be on there. If you look up in the upper right-hand corner of your 990, it'll say, I think for public, I can't think of that. I can't think of the actual words, but it says for public access or for public whatever, right? So it'll say the ones that you're supposed to make available will say that in the corner. The ones you're not supposed to make available or don't have to make available, that won't say that in the corner. It doesn't. I mean, I look at 990s all the time and I see people put Schedule B up all the time.
Absolutely.
You don't have to, because you don't have to necessarily tell everybody exactly who all your donors are when you
And
tell
that's
the
probably a
IRS.
relief for our listeners, because I think people struggle with wanting, not wanting to share that information all the time. And we all know sometimes really good fundraising researchers and prospect researchers will go to other websites to look at donor names and see if there's some connection. So I think for those who want to keep that confidential, at least that provides an avenue to do that.
Yeah. But the question isn't what am I supposed to? The question is what should I put on there, right?
Right.
So I think for financial information, you're going to want to put some financial statements. If you've got an audit, put the audit on there. So you've got your audited financial statements up there. And then it's not necessarily financial information, but you probably want to have some program information up there too about what it is that your business is doing, what your nonprofit is actually doing in the community, so that people can see that.
Absolutely. Because if you think about it, everything is pointing to the fact that donors, the first place they go these days when they're checking out a nonprofit is online, right? They check out the website. And I can share from my own perspective, when I actually look at a nonprofit's website and I can't find what I need easily, it can get frustrating. It's one of those things where you just sort of want to have a place where you can real quickly sort of check off some boxes in your head. And I think donors feel the same way. So having those audited financials, being really transparent. I mean, today's donors, I don't know if you feel this way, Andy, but today's donors, I think many of them are more skeptical, or you have to build trust. And so transparency is a way to do that, saying, hey, here's who we are, here's our annual report, here's maybe our audited financials, here's our 990 that isn't public yet on GuideStar, but that you might want to check out for the last year. I also think sort of the big hot button with a lot of donors, and I know it's a debate that we all have, is the program and admin expenses and fundraising expenses for an organization. And, right, wrong, or indifferent, the reality is donors are looking at that. So having a pie chart or something that shows here's how dollars are being spent within the organization, which they can find on the audit and some of the other financials as well. But making it simple for donors, probably is going to help build a relationship with them, even if it's just online.
Yeah, and that's an interesting thing to put the pie chart of overhead, what's fundraising, and what's program. If you don't do that, I mean, it's just a division problem. The donors are going to be able to do that pretty easily. Anybody looking at if they can see what's public on GuideStar, they can do that calculation. But I think GuideStar is an interesting place to look, because they just recently changed the way their seals work. It used to be like the organization got bronze, silver, gold, or platinum, and now they've added the word transparency. I think it's just in the last year or so they added the word transparency. And so what they're trying to do is they're trying to increase the transparency of those organizations that are members of GuideStar. And so if you go on GuideStar and you look at, what do I need to put in at bronze level, they will say it has to be your name of your organization, your 990 has to be up there, the board of directors, staff, and some program information, your NTEE code, really basic stuff to get bronze. And everybody should have bronze. That should be super easy.
That's a basic.
And then look at silver and gold and platinum, because it's not that much more information, and it's stuff that your donors are going to want to see, like what good things you're doing in the community and all kinds of other information. I think that's a great place to go just to get an answer to that question. So it's not just financial information, it's what information should be made available, and that's kind of the answer there.
It's a great marketing tool for nonprofits that doesn't cost anything, and that nonprofits really can access when donors are doing their own research. And a lot of donors today are pretty savvy, and they know to go to GuideStar. I had an organization talk to me recently and say, oh, well, I put GuideStar as a link on the website, and so isn't that enough to financial info? And I would say, it's great to point donors there, but then you get them, they're now redirected off your page. So if there's, on your website, so if there's a way to take some of what you've already given to GuideStar and put on your own website, so again, you're kind of making it seamless for the donor, why not do it?
Yeah. And donors do look. They go onto your website and they want to see the board up there. They want to see the staff up there. They want to see financials readily available. If they go to your website and you say you're a nonprofit but you don't have all that stuff, they're just going to click away and find somebody new. One more thing, and it's not technically financial, but it is the one thing that you're required to have on your website in Nevada that I think 80% of nonprofit websites in Nevada do not have this information. You have to have information about your charitable solicitation registration statement through the state of Nevada. So the Secretary of State makes you do the charitable solicitation registration. You basically just check a box and say that, yes, we have it, but the statute actually requires that you put information like your address, your mailing address, as well as that you can take tax-deductible donations, that you are a 501c3. It's just those 3 pieces of information need to be any place on your website where you're accepting a donation. And I'd say a huge chunk of nonprofits do not have that. Well, now that we've said it on the podcast, right, they're going to start cracking down. But they haven't actually cracked down on it, but they can. So the Attorney General could just decide one day that he feels like cracking down on this, and there'd be a lot of pain. So it's probably the best to be out in front of that.
Absolutely. Get ahead of the curve.
We opened up a volunteer opportunity for office work. We're looking for someone to work 2 hours, 3 days a week during normal 9 to 5 hours. We were getting few responses until yesterday when we received an email from an individual offering to volunteer for this. Here's the challenge. They need to do the hours at night, given their day job. Do you think I should accommodate this request and work a couple of extra hours a few times a week? Certainly have plenty of work to do, and I don't want to turn off this potential volunteer. I'm also trying to maintain some sort of family time. Your thoughts?
I'm going to take this probably into my own realm these days of boundary setting and personal self-care. And the fact that this person who wrote in said that they, are looking to have some sort of family time tells me a lot with this question. So if for some reason they hadn't put that or said, gosh, I'm okay, I'm totally okay working, maybe late hours or extra hours or whatever on the days of volunteers here, then I might respond differently. But I think just trying to be sensitive to the person who wrote in, I would say, I think it can be tough, right? It can be tough to recruit quality volunteers, people who actually are the ones that, we really need to do a job. We can fall into the trap of almost becoming like desperate or convincing ourselves that, this sort of putting ourselves out for this person is only it's a momentary thing. It's momentarily. And at the end of the day, the reality is that there will be other volunteers and there probably will be other people. So I guess my gut instinct is say stick to your guns about you knew what you wanted. You wanted someone 3 days a week between 9 to 5. There's probably a reason you wanted them between 9 to 5, right? Because if there was something that someone could do as a volunteer at home, then I'm assuming that would have already been an option. And so for whatever reason, they need to be in the office from 9 to 5. So, maybe it's helping answer phones or whatever it could be. So I think it's about thanking this volunteer for their interest, looking at this as an opportunity to build a relationship with them and explaining to them why you need it in this time frame. Do they know of anyone else who might be able to help out, that's like them during this time frame, and then seeing if there might be some volunteer projects they can help you with. Obviously, they want to help you. So are there other projects you have that they could help you with, maybe after hours or on their schedule? So you think there's a way to come full circle, and it'll be a win-win with this volunteer. Perhaps they even have a colleague or someone you can enlist them to help you think through finding what you need, and then also sticking to your own guns about, this is work time versus family time. We don't do a great job of that in the nonprofit sector, and I think we need to do more of it.
I agree completely and have absolutely nothing to add. That's that's the answer. One thing I would say is I get the sense that you want to be really responsive to your donors, and you're treating this volunteer like they're a good donor, and you want to maintain that relationship, like you said. But yeah, you do have to have some sort of at some point you just have to say, nope. I can't.
Thank you, but
right? Thank you, but that's just not going to work. And I think people will, most rational people will understand that. They didn't come to you and say, how dare you? They came to you and said, I'd like to help. And so giving them an answer yeah, that just doesn't work for me, and explaining why, I think they'll be fine.
Absolutely.
That's actually a good way to start a conversation about stuff.
It is.
Yeah, totally agree. All right. I am a new executive director of a nonprofit that has been led by its founder up until recently. The board I have inherited has done very little because their founder and friend did it all, never engaging them. Is my board a lost cause? Do you have any suggestions on how to engage a board that has never been expected to be engaged up to this point?
The good news is I don't think your board has lost cause.
A lost cause.
Yay! I mean, that's the great news. I think it's going to take a little bit of time and education, and then you can determine if they're a lost cause. But I mean, the reality comes in that if many times board members don't know what they don't know, right? They're not even sure what they are supposed to do. Many board members don't understand what their roles and responsibilities are. So when they have their friend, Sally Sue, who asks them to be on the board and she's the founder and kind of doing everything, they're like, great, I'm a placeholder. They don't even realize the fiduciary and governance, responsibility. So I think it's an opportunity for some education and some training to start. Perhaps it's at a board retreat or even at a board meeting that you can bring in a professional to share with the board, here's what some best practices are, and here's what it means to be on a nonprofit board. And, along with that, having some honest discussion with the board about what kind of board do they want to be, and you as a new executive director, what kind of board, what kind of support are you looking for from your board as a partnership with you? Having some of that honest dialogue right at the beginning, it's a time of transition. It seems like a huge opportunity to sort of start fresh and see. And the reality is some of them are probably going to say, you know what, my allegiance was to Sally Sue and she's no longer there. And this sounds like way more than I signed up for and way more work than I realized. And you may lose them. And that's okay, because you certainly don't want board members who aren't, exercising their fiduciary duties.
So, this question is kind of based like on after the fact. Like, so the founder and person that's done everything is already gone. What would you recommend to nonprofits that still have that founder that's in place to be prepared for when the founder decides, I'm done, or dies, or whatever?
That's a great question. I think there's really thinking through and sort of if you have a planned process, right? We're going to assume there's a planned process where the founder is going to be, sort of moving away from the organization in the next 6 months or year or whatever that is. You have time then to actually, if you are on the board and you do happen to know what you should be doing or maybe has never been done, it's a great opportunity to come up with that transition plan of what do we want, our next board to be like? How do we want to have board members who perhaps can even be part of our, process of helping us find the next phase or our next executive director, since the board's part of hiring that person. So I think, but that again makes the assumption that you have a board that knows that or you have at least one board member that knows that there's more to be desired. So if you have kind of a board that has no clue about what they should be doing, then probably they're not going to be thinking about any of this. But my hope is that there's at least one person out there, or if there's, some opportunity that there's staff that interact with the board, or somebody that, that maybe the board members will be listening to this podcast, right? And they can actually put out an executive transition plan, because in some ways, I think that has got to be a planful process of what does it look like having the founder leave. I mean, that's a whole other topic of how do we prepare as an organization? What does our next board look like?
Yeah.
What do you think?
I don't know. I mean, so I've been with at least 2 organizations that were run by a founder. The founder wasn't a board chair. The founder was an executive director. So member of the board from the executive director, CEO standpoint. And in both cases, the executive director decided that they were done and they wanted to move on. And both organizations had relatively large staffs too. So we spent the time to put together the transition plan to say, this is what we have. This is what this person's strengths were. And to let the board know that when they were bringing on this new person, that they weren't necessarily going to have to replace all of those strengths, that there were ways that we could shore up some of the things that this person was good at without having to bring in an exact clone. And also to let the rest of the board know that it was okay, that staff was actually smart enough to run the place, like regardless of whether the founder was there. The founder was the founder and should take most of the credit for the success of the organization. But once the founder had left, that we kind of have it figured out now. That leadership is great, but we don't necessarily need that person here anymore, and we can keep going by ourselves. So I think if you can get the staff to help drive that process too, and to be part of the because staff really knows what you need. Like the board thinks they know what the organization needs, but the staff really knows what the organization needs. So to get staff input, I think would be a
And I think that works really well if you have a large enough staff to do that, right?
Yeah. That's definitely a big organization solution, right?
Yeah.
A small organization solution is completely different.
It
so
is.
if you're talking about where the board chair is also the single staff member who does everything unpaid, and then that person leaves, that's a completely different question.
Yeah. It can get sticky, and sometimes it gets a little bumpy along the way. I do love, though, transition plans as much as you can do them, because it's an opportunity to reflect on what's worked and what, just like there's different boards that are appropriate at different stages of an organization, I think the same comes with, paid staff leadership, right? So a founder is oftentimes great for a certain period of time, and then it's time to get somebody who can take it to the next level or just sustain what's already been built.
Yeah, and there are staff members that are like that too. Like my personal preference is to work for organizations that are just starting out and growing. And then once they get to that sort of steady state where we're doing the same thing over and over again, I get so bored. And I'm the worst person that you want, because I'm like
You're twiddling your
like
thumbs.
a border collie. I just keep tearing up the garden. Like, what are you
Trying
doing?
to find something. Yeah.
I don't
Is
know.
there a problem?
Let's fix something. I don't. So there's definitely people for that. I think one of the things that bothers me about this question too, especially in really small organizations that don't grow past zero board or zero staff members. So those tiny organizations. What happens if it's the founder, this person's all of the impetus for the entire organization, they've built a board of friends, and then they decide to step away. They get too sick to continue working on it, or that person just can't continue. Isn't rolling up and saying, yeah, we had a good run, an option too?
Yeah, absolutely. It's okay. I think sometimes we all think our nonprofit needs to last forever. And there are times where maybe it served its purpose for a certain period, or maybe there's other organizations that now are doing a better job or have grown to a point where they've were duplicative to a point where we're not adding any value to our communities we serve. We've got to have an honest assessment. And just like businesses don't last, how many businesses do you know that have lasted forever?
Right.
It doesn't happen.
And there's stories of really big like the March of Dimes, right? The March of Dimes was originally give one dime to help eradicate polio, and then we got to that point, and then they just moved on to something new. So they, because they had this big organization, they're good at fundraising, and they thought we can broaden our mission to include some other things. But that's not the only way to do it. And you're right, like most businesses don't there's no that many blacksmiths around that are fixing
Exactly.
horseshoes, because you just don't need that anymore.
Exactly.
That's an interesting thing. It's much more philosophical of a question than we usually answer.
Yes.
I don't know if I'm equipped for that.
Me neither, unless I have a lot of coffee or some alcohol.
Yeah, I feel like we should talk about this longer, but then we would just be talking.
Exactly. Nobody wants that. Well, thanks for joining us for another episode of Nonprofit Everything, where we chat about everything nonprofit and everything that's on your mind. As a reminder, we would love for you to write in some of your questions. You can reach out to us via the ANN website, or you can look at nonprofiteverything.com and check us out there and submit your question, and we'll make sure to get to it. So would love to hear from you. Thanks for joining us, and a big thank you to Alliance for Nevada Nonprofits for making this possible.